Good to have you with us. It's Tuesday, January 6th, 2026, and we have a lot to talk about today. We're diving into some huge stories that are really shaping our world right now. We're talking everything from a dramatic presidential capture that's shaking up international relations, all the way to scientific breakthroughs that could literally reshape our future.
All right, so here's what's on the docket. We'll kick things off with our top story, that crisis in Venezuela. Then, we're going to zoom out and look at some of the biggest humanitarian flashpoints around the globe and check the pulse of the economy for 2026. After that, we'll look ahead at what's new in tech and science, and we'll wrap it all up with a quick look at other world news.
All right, let's get right to it. Our top story tonight is a really stunning geopolitical event unfolding in the Americas. Over the weekend, U.S. Special Forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro in Caracas. This is a move that has sent major shockwaves all across the globe.
And as you can imagine, the international reaction was, well, it was swift and it was sharp. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he didn't mince words. He expressed deep alarm, saying this whole thing, quote, constitutes a dangerous precedent. And that, right there, sets the stage for a major diplomatic confrontation.
So how did all of this go down? Let's break down the last 48 hours. It all started on Saturday morning with the capture. By Monday, just yesterday, Maduro was already in a New York courthouse. And back in Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as the nation's new acting president. Things are moving fast.
Okay, so this all came to a head at an emergency session of the UN Security Council. And let me tell you, the division was crystal clear. On one side, you have the US. They're arguing that Maduro was an illegitimate leader, a so-called president, and so he isn't entitled to the protections of a head of state. But on the other side, the UN chief fired back, invoking the UN Charter and really emphasizing national sovereignty. You're essentially looking at two completely opposite interpretations of international law clashing head-on.
Now, what's happening in Venezuela, it doesn't exist in a bubble, right? It's really part of a much wider pattern of global instability. And to help us understand that bigger picture, we're turning to the International Rescue Committee's 2026 Emergency Watch List. This list, it basically flags the countries that are at the greatest risk of seeing their humanitarian crises get even worse.
So who's at the top? For the third year in a row, it's Sudan, which is just being devastated by civil war and famine. Following Sudan, you've got the occupied Palestinian territory, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Haiti. And get this, think about this for a second. These countries on the watch list, they're home to only about 12% of the world's population, but they account for a staggering 89% of all humanitarian need on the planet. Just let that sink in.
But amidst all this really bleak news, there is a small glimmer of hope. The UN is reporting that for the first time since 2023, humanitarian assistance is actually set to meet 100% of the basic food needs for people in Gaza, and that is a really significant development in what's been a very long-running crisis.
Okay, so let's connect some dots here. Major geopolitical events, like what we're seeing in Venezuela, they don't happen in a vacuum, right? They have an immediate and sometimes powerful impact on the global economy. So let's take a look at how the markets are reacting to all this.
And the reaction, well, it was strong, to say the least. U.S. markets totally rallied on Monday. The Dow Jones shot up 1.4%, closing at a brand new record high. And it wasn't just the Dow. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq also saw some really solid gains.
So, why the rally? What's going on here? Well, it was mostly driven by energy and financial stocks. It seems investors aren't really looking at this as a huge geopolitical risk. Instead, they're seeing it as a potential opportunity. The thinking is that this whole development could unlock future investment in Venezuela's absolutely massive oil sector.
Okay, but despite all the optimism on Monday, there's still a lot of anxiety about the year ahead. So if we look past the daily headlines, what are those big picture risks? The things that are really keeping investors and economists up at night.
Well, a recent poll from Deutsche Bank points to one single dominant concern. A full 57% of the people they polled said the number one risk to market stability is a bursting AI and tech bubble. That concern just towers over everything else, things like the independence of the U.S. Fed or even a potential crisis in private credit markets. It's all about the AI bubble.
And hey, speaking of technology, let's make a pivot. Let's move away from the risks of today and start looking at the promise of tomorrow. Because right now, the annual CES Tech Conference is in full swing out in Las Vegas, and it's giving us a really cool glimpse of the innovations that are going to be shaping our future.
So what's the hot tech on the floor this year?
Well, we've got humanoid robots from Boston Dynamics and VinMotion that are actually designed to work in factories. There's this thing called the Sweetcar AI Pet. It's a pet that physically grows as you play with it. Wild. Samsung is there, of course, showing off a 130-inch TV they're calling the world's largest. We're also seeing AI-powered robotic massage rollers, and TCL has these super bright HDR micro-OLED display glasses.
But it's not all just gadgets. Away from the show floor in Vegas, a truly monumental scientific breakthrough is making headlines. So scientists have developed a whole new form of CRISPR technology. It's called epigenetic editing. And here's the key. Instead of actually cutting the DNA, which can be pretty risky, this is a much gentler approach. It works by targeting the chemical anchors that are attached to our DNA, the ones that basically act like on and off switches for our genes.
And you have to understand, this could be an absolute game changer for treating genetic conditions like sickle cell disease. So here's how it could work. First, doctors would collect a patient's blood stem cells. Then they use this new tool to basically remove those chemical anchors from a specific gene, which essentially reactivates it, turns it back on. Then they return those newly edited cells to the patient. And the idea is that these modified stem cells will start producing healthier red blood cells. It's a potential path to a safer, lifelong therapy, all without the risks that come with actually snipping the DNA.
Okay, let's shift gears now for a rapid-fire roundup of some other important stories from around the globe.
First up, some tragic news out of northern Nigeria. Emergency services are reporting that at least 25 people have died after a boat capsized, and sadly, another 14 people are still missing. And over in Indonesia, at least 12 people have been killed after some really devastating flash floods swept through the Sio Tagulandang Biaro Islands Regency. And for our last story, on a completely different note, over at Tokyo's famous Toyosu fish market, a single bluefin tuna weighing 243 kilograms was just sold for a mind-blowing, record-breaking $3.2 million at their big New Year auction. Yep, $3.2 million for one fish.
So when you step back and look at it all, from a presidential capture that's shaking up global markets, to a new form of gene editing that could literally rewrite our future, today's events really show a world in rapid, constant flux. You see how a political move in one country immediately ripples through the global markets, right? And at the same time, an innovation happening in a quiet lab could completely change the course of human health for millions. It's just a powerful reminder of how deeply interconnected everything is. So the real question isn't just what's going to happen tomorrow. It's how will all these seemingly separate stories connect and collide to shape the world we'll all be living in? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us.